Hello and welcome to A Stitch in Time. Today is Thursday, September 13th, 2018, and this is episode 72. My name is Carol and I'm known as Knits and Pearls on Ravelry. The show notes for this and every episode can be found on the blog and also in the episode thread in the Ravelry group. If you'd like to get in touch, you can do so via private message on Ravelry, by leaving a comment on YouTube, or by leaving a comment in the group, and I'll do my best to get back to you as soon as I can. Some weeks it takes me longer than others. This would be one of those weeks, but I think I've caught up with everyone now. Thanks to everyone who did reach out this week. It's always nice to hear from you, and the interaction is the best part of doing this podcast, hands down. Welcome to all of you, whether you're new or returning viewers. For those who don't know, I live in the Fraser Valley of British Columbia, Canada, which is about 60 miles or 100 kilometers east of Vancouver. And Vancouver, in a couple of weeks, will be hosting Knit City at the Forum on the Peony grounds. And I'm very excited. It's the first time that I will be able to attend, and I'm also really excited because I'm going to meet one of the viewers there. If you're coming, I'd love to meet you too. There is a thread in the group. I think it's titled something like, "Are you going to Knit City?" By all means, chime in there if you are, or drop me a private message if you prefer. And if we can, I'd love a chance to meet you. I think I'm probably just going on the Saturday, but my plans are kind of still up in the air, so I don't know quite for sure yet. But I am going. That is a for sure. We always seem to be away in other years, so I'm really excited to have this chance. It is kind of late. It's like 4:30, much later than I had planned to record today. But with one thing or another, here I am. So it was now or never. So here I am. I am kind of flying without show notes. My Yarny notes are all basically the same as last week because all the projects are the same. But I'm going to kind of wing it with everything else. So hopefully it's not too scattered, and hopefully I don't forget to say a lot of things. I do have a couple of finished projects this week. I have some works in progress. I have a little bit about what I've been reading, what I've been watching. Have to remember to get that one in, and a little bit about what's been going on. So settle in with your beverage of choice. I always like to usually end up drinking tea when I watch podcasts. I usually end up sipping tea when I'm recording my podcast. Today's no exception. This is actually English afternoon tea, which my daughter Jessica had given me back in the spring, and this is the last tea bag from it. So it's just like basically a black tea, much like a English breakfast tea, but it's quite nice. I'll have to figure out where she got it, and maybe I can get some more. Well, I know where she got it, I just don't know what shop. Okay, let's start, shall we? So, first finished project are the socks that I have been knitting for my brother-in-law, Ed, for his birthday in November. And this was the first one, I believe. Yes, this was number one. I had that done a little while ago. It's using yarn, it's Crazy Zauberball in color number 1660 called Flisbet, which I never know. I'm probably butchering. I looked it up, and it translates from German into riverbed. So I'm calling these my riverbed socks because I can speak English, not German. I did an afterthought heel, which I don't often do, but I didn't want to disrupt this striping along the front. And I did this afterthought heel when I was about this far along. I prefer to do them then because then I can kind of get in at this area from this end. It's open. I just find it easier for weaving in ends and manipulating the stitches, etc. However, when it came to sock number 2, and I used yarn from the other end of the ball, but when I got to this sock, the yarn at the other end of the ball was all very much like these colors, and I wanted a bit of a contrast. So in this case, I actually knit the whole sock, Kitchenered the toe, and then immediately did the heel. So they have similar colors at the foot and heel, and gave me that contrast that I wanted. They haven't been blocked, so they look a little bit crinkly on the blockers, but quite happy with them. And I hope he is too. So there we go. Another pair of socks down. I took some yarn. I worked on these, more or less finished them except for the heel on our way up to the cabin this weekend. And I did take some more sock yarn. I was going to cast on another pair of socks, and then I ended up working on shawls instead, and so I still don't have another pair of socks on the needle, and I'm going to have to rectify that soon, because they really are the best project to have for just those moments when you just have a few minutes to knit and don't need to pay a lot of attention, or can't pay a lot of attention. So that I'm going to have to figure out soon. Okay, so part of the reason that I was late recording today is that I wanted to finish this next project first. I was like this close to the end, and so I persevered. So this is the Aurora shawl by Helen Stewart, and this is the third one that I've knit. I really love this pattern. I love the color play. I love that it is simple yet effective, not so difficult. You can't work on it while talking with people or watching a program. I like that it's divided into sections, and so you have little milestones along the way. So there's an overall view of it. All of the yarns I used are Sweet Georgia Yarns Tough Love Sock. 4 of the colors came from this Party of 5 mini skein set. Raspberry, mulberry, grape jelly, and ultraviolet. I just took out this yellow lemon curd. And then I added in leftovers of Anthem. You're not going to be able to read that very well. It's kind of cracked. And then also London Fog. Don't know if you can see that or not. So I'll kind of work my way through the shawl, and I'll tell you what each color is. So this beginning is Anthem. And the next section is London Fog, which is the gray and grape jelly. The third section is the dark purple is ultraviolet, and the bright pink is raspberry. And then this final section, oops, is mulberry, and then it's ended off with the raspberry. I had a few doubts while I was making it. I really liked the first 2 sections and how they worked together. And then I was second guessing myself on the next section. And then I was thinking that maybe I should have done this contrast here at the end, either with the dark ultraviolet or with the London Fog. But I decided to use the colors the same way they're used in the pattern, and overall I'm pretty happy with it. This is the medium version, but it's knit with fingering weight yarn on a smaller needle, a 3.5mm needle. The pattern's originally written for sport weight. But I don't like a really big shawl. This is like the perfect size to just use as a like a shawlette or a scarf. So I will wear it something like this. Not the best zhuzhing job, but there you go. Get a sense of it anyway. And I think the colors do work together fine. If you've been watching for a while, you know I've had that Party of 5 set for a while and have attempted to use it several times before. And so, okay, I was going to be a little bit, I was going gonna say come hell or high water, this one was gonna work. I guess I can say that, can't I? Anyway, I was determined. How about we put it that way? I was determined that this time it was going to work, and it did. So pleased about that. Look forward to wearing this this coming winter. Just going to reach out of frame and tuck it there. So that brings me to works in progress, and there are 3 more shawls. The first, we might as well continue on Helen Stewart theme. So the next one is Planting Seeds, which, as you can see, is a 3-color shawl, kind of crescent or semicircular in fashion. And for it, I chose, sorry, I just got to reach over here. Everything is just slightly too far away for my short arms. I chose these 3 colors of, won't be able to see that next to my black shirt. These 3 colors of Louette Gems Fingering. This is pure white, this is Neptune, and this is charcoal. So I showed it last week. I haven't done a ton more, but keep in mind the rows are really long, so it takes quite a while to get across. So I think last week I had about 3 of these charcoal stripes done, so I have 3 more. I worked on this on the way home from the cabin, so it was a good car project. I didn't have to look down a whole lot except on these rows where I had to slip stitches, but it was pretty easy to work. I'm going to bring that up closer so you can see the slip stitch pattern. Now, according to the instructions, I'm 35% of the way through, but we recently got a pattern update, and I've just looked at it and learned that these solid sections are actually longer than was originally written. So if that's the case, I'm not actually sure how far through I am now. Maybe 30%. Doesn't matter. It's a good one to work on watching TV or, as I said, riding in the car. And so it's coming along nicely. I can't remember. I know I counted at some point how many more of these stripes I had to do till I reached the solid sections, but I can't remember. And it doesn't matter. Be done when it's done. So the next one is, again, using Sweet Georgia Yarns Tough Love Sock. And it is Cedarburg by Tabitha Hedrick. And this was last year's Sweet Georgia Mystery Knit Along. And as I was preparing to knit this year's Sweet Georgia Mystery Shawl, I decided to revive this one. I had attempted to knit it last year, or I guess earlier this year, but I didn't like the way the color combination was working, so I swapped out one of them for another, and I'm happier with it. Just trying to find places to put everything. So my original 2 colors were Gold Mine, Gold Mine, and Smitten. And I had originally used a bright pink like this called Orchid, but I swapped it out for a dark purple. And this is not Sweet Georgia Yarns. This is actually called Impulse of Delight. It's her Summit Sock in the dark amethyst colorway. It's quite similar to Sweet Georgia's Ultraviolet, which I had at one time thought I would combine, but then I ended up using it for a different project. So these are the 3 together. And it's coming along quite nicely. I'm glad I made the switch. I can see myself following through with this one and actually completing it. So again, it's a very similar style to the Aurora shawl, only it will be quite a bit larger because it is more or less 3 skeins of yarn as opposed to 6 mini skeins. So I think when I spoke to you last, I think I had finished this section here. So as you can see, I've done a little bit more, and now the next section is going to basically look like that. It's just in the plain smitten with these, I think they call it columns or something like that. So yeah, that's coming along, and the purple definitely grounds that gold, so it's not quite so bright as the original version. So I'm very happy with how that is coming along, and I've enjoyed working on it. So I've got things everywhere as always, and I'm always afraid they're just going to fall, or well, sometimes they do, as you know. My last project I have just kind of tucked in my bag here. I'm going to have to bring it out. So the final project, if you do not want to be spoiled, this is this year's Sweet Georgia mystery shawl knit along. Called Tulameen. By the way, I don't know if I ever said before, Tulameen is a small town in British Columbia. Now I noticed on the title it's spelled Tullameen, where the town is actually just spelled with one L, but I'm assuming that's the inspiration for the name. I don't know that for sure, but Sweet Georgia is a Vancouver, British Columbia company, so I'm assuming that's where that comes from. So it is also a 3-color shawl, and for my colors, I've got to find them here. I chose Mirror Pond. So you can see it's got this teal and off-white and bright green. And then I just have this little bit left of Sea Spray. And then I used one-of-a-kind skein I had got. That's this kind of spring green. So that's my color selection. So this is main color, this is contrasting color 1, and this is contrasting color 2. So we actually haven't used this color yet. I'm hoping the next clue maybe starts to incorporate it. So I'm about halfway through clue 3. So as I showed you last week, sorry, I've got ends everywhere. So as I showed you last week, the first step was to knit a big square. And I pictured the shawl going out from this in a rectangular fashion, but actually turn the square on its side to become a diamond and knit out from there. So I'm at the same point on either end. So you can see the next steps were to alternate the 2 colors and work in some lace. And I think we finished about right there. So this is what I've done so far in clue 3. I am supposed to do another section of these stripes, but I don't have enough of the main color. And in fact, we are told if we don't have enough, we can skip this section and this section and move to the next section. But I decided, because this kind of echoed this side, kind of balanced it out, I decided I would knit that there. And then the next section after this basically involves knitting this part only in the green. And so I thought it would balance out just fine, and it let me add just that little bit more length and that little bit more of the main color. So the rest of clue 3 is basically some stockinette and some garter in just the green. So I'm going to do that next. So there's a good overall look at it so far. I am really liking it. Again, a simple yet interesting pattern to work on. One that you don't have to pay too much attention to, but is not just plain knitting by any stretch. And color changes help keep it interesting too. So I'm anxious to see how this color gets incorporated into it. I'm assuming or hoping that that will be in clue 4, and there are 2 more clues to come. So yeah, I'll finish working on that probably over the weekend and be ready for clue 4, which I think comes out on Tuesday. Yeah, Tuesday. Okay, so that's my knitting. As for what I've been reading, I mentioned last week that I had finished On the Banks of Plum Creek by Laura Ingalls Wilder, and that I was interested in going back to the chapter in, sorry, I'm going to jiggle here. Going back to the chapter, jiggle all over the place, sorry about that. I wanted to go back to the chapter in Pioneer Girl, her original manuscript, to compare it to On the Banks of Plum Creek. And that whole section in her series, fictional series, she omitted a whole couple of years of her life that the family actually left Walnut Grove, or the banks of Plum Creek, and they lived in a place called Burr Oak. But it was not a very happy time for their family, and so she omitted it from her children's or young adult series. But it was interesting having visited this site of their homestead on Plum Creek this summer. It was really cool to, again, read On the Banks of Plum Creek with a new perspective, but also read the manuscript and have a deeper understanding of the landscape and how things were laid out, just how far it was from town, how where the dugout was in relation to the fields and other landmarks. And in here, there's also a map that shows where the site of the new home, their board house, their frame house was in relation to the dugout. And I think it is probably very close to the site of the existing house that's on that land. Gently put this down as a heavy book, and I've got my camera set up on my ironing board here, so it's a little bit jiggly. I also took a look at this book. I believe my sister Janine had given this to me as a gift years ago. So it is Laura Ingalls Wilder, Country by William Anderson. And it's all about the different sites of the little house books, or different places where Laura had lived. And so there are pictures in here of, just going to find it here. This one is a picture that Garth Williams, the illustrator, took when he was doing research for illustrating the book. There's also like I had showed to you, a sign where the dugout used to be. And this is the tableland that is described. We also walked along there. And in here, there's a picture of this outbuilding for the farm. And it stated that this the frame house that Pa built near Plum Creek stood until the 1940s, when it was dismantled. Lumber from what Laura called the wonderful house was used to construct this farm building. So anyway, it was kind of neat. And then there's the neighbors that the Nelsons are based on, if you've read the book. Well, they are also Nelson, so she based those characters. And yeah, so it was kind of neat to then read this book again. Like I say, read the children's series and then sort of simultaneously read the and sort of now I've moved on to the next book in the series, By the Shores of Silver Lake, and I'm going to do the same. I'll read the novel and then I'll read the corresponding section of Pioneer Girl. And I've already looked through this a little bit more extensively when I pulled it out the other day, just to look at the pictures and such from De Smet, which is where the rest of the series takes place. And I'd forgotten, when I pulled out Pioneer Girl, when I was there in De Smet this summer, we went on a little tour, so I put my little badge in. We had to have a sticker to show we were on the tour, so I had put it in this book. And I'd also tucked a leaf from the cottonwoods that stood on the original homestead. I had stuck that into the book, so it fell out when I opened it, so I've got to be careful to keep this in a safe place till I'm finished with Pioneer Girl, so I don't damage it, and then I'll store it in here. I also have a bookmark that I bought in De Smet that shows some of the different Laura Ingalls Wilder sites, and then pictures of the family. So that seemed like an appropriate bookmark to put in here too. Okay, it's going to jiggle again, I warn you. So that book is so heavy, I'm worried about the ironing board is doing a complete flip. This week I've also been listening to Bob Woodward's new book, Fear, about the Trump White House. While I am Canadian, not American, the United States is our closest neighbor and ally. And I think it's an interesting time there, both politically and historically. And I can't help but take an interest, because ultimately what happens in the United States does have an impact on Canada. So I think I'm about, I don't know, an hour or two into it. Unless you've been living under a rock, I'm sure that you've heard excerpts from this book on the news over the past couple of weeks, so I don't really need to probably say much more than that. What I'm really excited about is that one of my favorite books, The Guernsey Literary and Potato Peel Pie Society by Marianne Schaefer and Annie Barrows, has been made into a film for Netflix, and I finally got around to watching it and quite enjoyed it. I wasn't sure how they would adapt it to a movie, to film, because this whole book is a series of letters between the main character and other characters. And I've actually never read the paper copy of this. I have listened to it on audiobook a couple of times, and they have different narrators reading the different characters. I have to say I quite enjoyed the movie. I thought they did a good job with the adaptation. And it's been long enough since I've listened to this that I know there were a few changes to make it work visually, but I think they stayed pretty true to the story and to the overall feel of the book. So I was quite enjoyed that. Good movie to knit by. As for what else I've been up to, I believe I mentioned that we went away this past weekend up to the cabin. We left Friday morning, came back late Monday afternoon, so we made a little bit of a holiday out of it, even though our main purpose was to go up as part of a work party. There was some maintenance work that needed doing up there, and I think there were 7 of us that were working. And, you know, that whole thing about many hands make light work is very true. And although some of it was not light work, it was tough work, having so many of us doing it really did help it go by more quickly. And we definitely had a good time. Well, we had a good time working too, but also a good time afterwards. We had a nice family dinner on Saturday night. And some of us were there from Friday till Sunday. People came and went at different times over the weekend. But we were all together Saturday night for dinner. So that was really nice. And then Cameron and I stayed on through Sunday night and Monday, as I mentioned. And so spent some time on our own with my mom. As predicted, we played some cards. That was fun. Got some knitting done, as you can tell. It was a good blend of working and leisure, so it was very good to get away. The weather cooperated. It was we did have a bit of rain Friday afternoon, but other than that, it stayed dry, and that's good because we were working outdoors. And it wasn't quite that. I was expecting that kind of crisp autumn feeling that we've had up there before. And while it definitely was cooler, on the cooler side as opposed to being hot like it is during the summer, it was lacking that little bit of, I don't know, frostiness. It's hard to explain, that crispness. But it was still nice. And when we were working, a lot of us got down to, t-shirts and pants. It wasn't, we didn't need jackets all the time or anything like that. So yeah, it was that was good. And then come back home. I had great intentions to do lots of work this week. There's things at home here that I need to kind of do some fall cleaning and organization. Haven't really done as much of that as I would have liked. One thing I am happy about is 2 days in a row now I've gone out walking. I've really let my exercise fall by the wayside over the summer for various reasons. So I'm happy to get back into a routine. It's fun to see some of the trees are starting to change and lose their leaves. So I do enjoy fall. Fall and spring are my favorite seasons. So I've been enjoying getting outdoors. I managed to do it between rain showers this morning, so that was a plus. We've definitely had some wetter weather. It actually rained here quite a bit over the weekend while we were gone, which was good for our lawn because it meant that it didn't need to be watered by sprinklers. I dread to see our water bill for this past month since we put all our new trees and our new grass in, but the wetter weather is saving us a few bucks, so that's good. Normally we would be starting curling in a few weeks, but we have a new rink this year, and so it's not quite ready, and it's too expensive to then put in ice in the old rink to use in the meantime, and so we just have a delayed start to our curling season this year. I think sometime into November, which isn't actually a bad thing because Cameron and I are going to be away the last 2 weeks of October, so it actually works out pretty well. I can't believe it's mid-September. Time it's just flying by so fast, and I know we all say that and we all experience it. And I remember, I think it was my mom saying, somebody said, the older you get, the faster it goes, and that is so very true. But it is what it is. We have to try and make the most out of it when we have it, and I'm kind of kicking myself because I have lots of good intentions and then find it easier to do things I'd like to do more. So I really have to be a little bit more disciplined and get some of these jobs done that need doing. I think that's all I can think of. Pardon me. Oh, I know, I meant to mention 9/11. Of course, it was the anniversary. 17th anniversary of 9/11 earlier this week. Pardon me, I'm sure we can all remember where we were when we heard about the terrible events of that day. And I feel for the victims and families all these years later because it's something you will probably never overcome. And yeah, definitely was on my mind earlier this week. And been watching the news with the storm approaching the east coast of the United States. So if you're in that area, wishing you well. I see it was downgraded to a Category 2. Not that that doesn't mean that this hurricane won't bring lots of damage. Sounds like a lot of rain coming your way. So if you're involved, wishing you all the best. Stay safe. And I think on that note, I will say goodbye now. It's probably now, will not get up until Friday sometime, but at least it's in the can and I can get it uploading and editing this evening. So take care, everyone. Thanks again for all of you who reached out this week. I love hearing from you. Happy knitting. Talk to you next week.